from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Thursday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and our phone number, if you want to call us, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And, of course, there was a sit-down in D.C. today. Que mala eres, of course, sitting down with Netanyahu, and you have all sorts of other things that are happening. We're going to get into those. We got Biden's doctor defending his excellent mental acuity. He insists that the president doesn't have Parkinson's-related ailments. I'll talk about that in a moment. President Trump says no 25th Amendment for Biden. Not at all. That would be too dangerous. Kamala Harris, que mala eres, is worse than Biden, and we need to keep Biden in office. You gotta love Trump's humor and his approach. And let me see, what else do we have? Judge Arthur Engeron says that he won't recuse himself in the Trump civil fraud trial, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well when we talk about our legal stuff. But I want to get into some of the clips that we have, because we've got a lot of clips. And it was quite a day. And yesterday, there was a lot of talk, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, where the media was saying, well, you know, the Republicans and all the conservative right-wing radio nuts are all talking about Kamala Harris being the border czar. And what's interesting is that, you know, they're now in like full denial, saying, well, that never happened, right? She's not the border czar. We never said she was the border czar. She never had any involvement with the border, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, we played some audio of that yesterday. But there's more. There's more. And this is all because, really, of one article that really kind of sparked this, that CNN and MSNBC and those hosts, they held on to that. And it was by a woman named Steph Knight. Kite. K-I-G-H-T. And the headline here, Harris border confusion haunts her new campaign. In early 2021, oh, come on. I'm reading on my phone. It gives all these pop-ups. In early 2021, President Biden enlisted Vice President Kamala Harris to help with a slice of the migration issue. I don't remember him using the word slice. A move that has turned into one of the newly presumptive presidential nominee's first campaign headaches. Why it matters: the confusion around the VP's exact role, early media misfires, and the rapidly... Isn't that funny? Early media misfires. No, the media didn't misfire. He said, she speaks for the president. We've got the audio. We'll play it in a moment. And that she was going to be there to handle this. And now she gets to pick and choose and say, well, I was only there for a slice. I mean, come on. Who do you think really believes this stuff? The way people write about things. Also, while we're on this topic, I was reading an article that was linked to a conservative aggregator. And like 3 paragraphs down, this website, which I think is, the reporting is pretty decent. It's called dailyfetched.com, I believe it's what it's called. And the 3rd paragraph down says that the Trump campaign was now scrambling because they had invested all this time and money running against Joe Biden and weren't comfortable, prepared, whatever it was, to run against Kamala Harris. And I thought, where's the fact in that? It didn't say according to a source, according to an interview we did with so-and-so, according to statements made by Trump at his X, Y, and Z rally. None of that. But yet it was in there as if it was gospel truth. And I remember reading it. It had to be like 2 nights ago maybe. And I thought, well, that's stupid. Because that's not even true. Because if you listen to Trump, and, you know, I guess given the job that I have here, I tend to, when there's a Trump rally or something like that, not only do we have the clips that we play on the radio and I'll take a look at the transcript, but many times I'll watch these things And if they're on while I'm on the radio, they're on mute with subtitles. So I'm pretty much watching the entirety of these things for the most part. And I just thought it was interesting because for a long time he's said that, whoever they run, because he knows that Joe wasn't going to make it. He's been saying it for quite a long time. So it's just, I find it astounding. Really, I'm just like, wow. How do you try to make an attack that's that baseless? But they do. The left will stop at nothing. And I just think it's silly to think that the Trump campaign was not ready for Joe to not run. There has been rumor of Michelle Obama for the last 3 election cycles. Why on earth do you think Donald Trump was very astute and surrounds himself with brilliant people? Why on earth would we think that he was not ready for that scenario? I mean, come on. The stupidity just overflows sometimes. And anyway, that was just something I wanted to say because it's legit fake news. Just like this woman is creating fake news here. This woman, Ms. Kite, who writes for Axios, who's saying that because of media misfires. No, the media didn't misfire. They don't fire anything. They lie and they misrepresent the facts. And that we know, right? That's why they have earned the nickname fake news media. But all that being said, this woman's just trying to do damage control to give Kamala a pass. Que mala eres, right? She's literally saying, well, because of the media did this and because they messed up and because Joe messed up and because this messed up and everybody here made mistakes except for que mala eres. I find that to be fascinating. If this one reporter is going to do that, will the rest of them? Are they going to do it on TV? Of course they are. They're going to contort themselves, bend over backwards, and do what they got to do to make it look like she is the second coming and everyone around her is the one that's wrong. That's it. We are the ones that are wrong, not her. Anyway, I want you to listen to this clip of audio. Don't go anywhere.
Quote unquote border czar. Vice President Harris was not a border czar.
Meantime, Vice President and border czar Kamala Harris facing some backlash.
What he said about Harris and immigration was not true. She was never appointed border czar.
And this will be her first visit to the U.S.-Mexico border region since she was appointed as the border czar by President Biden.
People are going to have to counter the misinformation. You already hear folks talking about the border czar. She wasn't the border czar.
President Biden tapped Kamala Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, to be the border czar.
Now, she wasn't the border czar. That's what Republicans labeled her.
They were very critical of Kamala Harris, especially in her role as border czar.
Now what she's up against is folks lying about her border record, calling her a border czar.
Kamala Harris, who was appointed as the border czar.
The Biden team didn't declare her the border czar. They wanted her to work on kind of the root causes of immigration.
There has been so much criticism against Kamala Harris. You know, she was the border czar.
Calling her sort of the border czar, which wasn't necessarily the case.
So that was it. Now, last night you heard the audio that I played, President Biden saying, that's why I'm putting her in charge of the border. And we'll play that audio for you in a moment. It's on yesterday's file list. But there's more for Kamala Harris, right? She actually says how she was planning on stopping the border crisis. Check this one out.
What is that solution? Can you understand the frustration, though, that Americans have about the situation at the border?
I'm in charge, for example, of coordinating what we call a root causes strategy. What are the causes of people leaving? We have now raised $3.2 billion to help the folks in those countries stay.
So stay, right? She said, we're going to tell them to stay. And then she said, don't come. Now, we know how effective she is with speaking and doing or not doing, I should say. But that doesn't really change everything, does it? Doesn't mean that Biden didn't appoint her. We heard that, the tape of that. And she even went and did interviews as the quote-unquote head of the border program, the border czar. She sat down with NBC News and talked about this exclusively, talking with Chuck Todd, saying, listen, Chuck, the border is secure. Listen to this.
Would you call the border secure?
The border is secure.
We're going to have 2 million people cross this border for the first time ever. You're confident this border is secure?
We have a secure border in that is a priority for any nation, including ours and our administration.
We have a secure border. We should be impeaching this lady, not just Alejandro Mayorkas, right? Unbelievable. Now, again, she insists that she's not. The media insists that she's not. These are Republican talking points. The right wing is going bizarre and mad, and they've made it all up. Well, here it is from Joe El Baboso Biden himself. Listen to this one.
Now Vice President Kamala Harris is stepping into a new role, taking the lead on the immigration crisis for the White House.
And with pressure growing on the Biden administration, the president tapping Vice President Kamala Harris to take the lead.
I think the best thing to do is to put someone who, when he or she speaks, they don't have to wonder about, is that what the president is? When she speaks for me.
President Joe Biden on Wednesday put Vice President Kamala Harris in charge of efforts to stem the flow of migrants at the U.S.-Mexico border that has led to a surge in unaccompanied children and an overcrowding of processing facilities.
But the vice president's agreed
to be the point person on immigration.
Madam Vice President, thank you. I gave you a tough job.
There's no question that this is a challenging situation.
The situation centers around the biggest surge in migrants to cross the U.S.-Mexico border in 20 years.
Taking on the border crisis today, putting Vice President Kamala Harris in charge.
Federal facilities being overwhelmed by the number of unaccompanied minors arriving each and every day.
So there you have it. The border is being overrun. Kamala Harris is the border lead. We can call her a czar if you like that word. And the media said that she was, and now they're saying that she wasn't. Which one is it? Obviously, you know the truth. That's the beauty of the internet, the beauty of saying things and having them recorded. You can't just walk back your statements. You really can't. So Kamala Harris, VP Kamala Harris, or Qué mala eres, I have to say, you are the border czar. All right, folks, I want to move on, and I want to talk about Judge Arthur Engeron, who says he will not recuse himself from Trump's civil fraud case. And that's some news from about 4 o'clock this afternoon. I want to talk about that and a couple of other legal issues. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
In his decision, Judge Engeron says he did nothing wrong when attorney Adam Lightman Bailey approached him on his way out of the courthouse, trying to talk to the judge about how to apply the law in the Trump civil case, 3 weeks before the judge issued his ruling.
That is a report from NBC New York, and that's the question about this judge recusing himself. The judge, Arthur Engeron, says, no, I'm not recusing myself, despite whatever requests were made for me to step aside. And again, this has been a problematic judge, I think, from the beginning, from what I observed. So I want to get into that. I want to talk a little bit about what's next with the documents case getting thrown out, what happens on the appeal there, Jack Smith's appeal on that case, and so much more. And to do that, I want to bring in the senior legal fellow from the Edwin Meese III Center for Legal and Judicial Studies at the Heritage Foundation, Sarah Parshall Perry. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
Oh, you bet. And I know you were recently at the RNC where you were a speaker, so I want to get a little bit of insight from you on that as well. But I'd love to get your reaction to this Judge Engeron situation where he says he's not recusing himself, and there was all sorts of other calls for him to recuse himself early on in that trial, and he ignored those as well, so it comes as no surprise to me. What's your thoughts on that?
So we have to sort of rewind the clock. We have to go back to Eileen Cannon, and we have to determine what happened in the classified documents case. And really what happened there was that she determined that special counsel Jack Smith was unconstitutionally appointed. That affects everything going forward, right? So everything going forward in the District of Columbia, whether that's in any federal court going forward, Jack Smith has been determined to be unconstitutionally appointed. That's a very big deal, and it's going to make a significant difference going forward with all of the other federal cases. Whatever the outcome is there, Jack Smith, who is the obviously specially appointed federal prosecutor there, it's going to make a very, very significant difference, and it's going to ultimately, in the end, determine that this is a case that is going to be essentially dismissed.
Yeah, I would hope so. So with respect to that case, they take it to appeal. Your thinking is that it'll be dismissed, that it won't be overturned or anything like that on appeal because of the basis of her ruling. Now, what are they able to, in this process, say, well, we don't like the arguments made by all these amicus curiae briefs, these lawyers that made those cases, and everybody else saying this legal argument that he's unconstitutionally appointed. We think what the White House thought was legit. Can they do that or no?
They can, and ultimately it's a determination for the justices. It's going to go inevitably up to the Supreme Court, and they will determine whether or not the amicus curiae briefs or the amici, as we like to call them, all those briefs, are presenting the strongest legal arguments. Now, remember, the Supreme Court does not convene until the 1st of October in 2024. The first Monday in October, this is actually the sort of the course of a movie, the first Monday in October. But what they have in September 30th, is the long conference. And that long conference will consider essentially whatever is pending before them at any point. And my consideration is that no doubt it will include, among others, the classified documents case. Now, the Supreme Court's already weighed in. They've already weighed in on presidential immunity. They've already weighed in on the January 6th defendants and whether or not the obstruction of justice charges were considered sort of too broad or too narrow. They determined that the DOJ had weighed in on a too broad basis. Long story short, I think the Supreme Court, in the end, is going to ultimately be the arbiter of whether or not this case goes forward or ultimately dies on the vine. Ultimately, what we've seen from Eileen Cannon, and you know this, Rich, is ultimately that the Supreme Court is going to, I think, accept Judge Eileen Cannon's determination. The special prosecutor, Jack Smith, was appointed unconstitutionally. That makes a difference for not only the case that was coming forward on the documents, but it also determines whether or not the case in the District of Columbia was brought constitutionally. They determined that federal district court, which is on appeal to the 11th Circuit, is ultimately going to determine whether or not that's constitutional. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it sounds like a big deal. Sarah Parshall Perry, stick with me. I want to continue to get your opinions on a few other legal matters, as well as the Engeron and the latest with the Title IX stuff. So stick with me, folks. We're coming right back with Sarah Parshall Perry, senior legal analyst with the Heritage Foundation fellow. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. We continue our discussion with Sarah Parshall Perry from the Heritage Foundation on these legal matters. And there's a piece in the New York Times from not too long ago that alludes to what's going on with Title IX. And I think it's always an important thing because we've seen so many drastic changes where they changed a few words and now all of a sudden they've kind of opened the floodgates. And the last time we had Sarah Parshall Perry with us, she kind of broke down exactly what the story was and what's going on. But I'd love to know what the updates are to that. Sarah Parshall Perry, bring us up to speed.
Yeah, this is Rich. There's a lot going on in this space. There are actually 9 federal lawsuits and 28 states have now been enjoined from the Title IX rule. Now remember, Title IX, very simple 37-word anti-discrimination statute, basically saying you can't discriminate on the basis of sex in any federally funded education program. Very simple, the shortest of all the anti-discrimination statutes in the Federal Register, and yet the Biden administration, as you know, Rich, we've talked about this before, has expanded it in 443 pages to include gender identity, gender expression, pregnancy, or related characteristics. It is exceptionally difficult.
And Sarah Parshall Perry, I just want to clarify, it used to be kind of specific to sex, right? The biological sex, and they've changed it to gender?
Exactly. And you understand that sex-separated spaces, remember, Rich, this was passed in 1972.
Back when girls were girls and boys were boys.
You got it. And this was essentially the crowning achievement of the women's liberation movement. Sex was sex, boys were boys, girls were girls. There was no debate about this whatsoever. Now, the Biden administration, for the first time ever, has changed the definition of biological sex to include gender identity or gender expression. That takes every sex-separated space to include those who feel like a girl, those who feel like a woman, and includes their particular inclusion in sports and gender identity spaces based on biological bathrooms and single-sex admissions and private spaces like overnight accommodations. It is exceptionally vast in its application, and Rich, it is one of the most significant changes we've ever seen from this administration. But we have seen 28 states now enjoined because the rule is fully applied as of August 1st, and we're approaching that right now. But 28 states, federal judges have now said you have a reprieve from the application of Title IX on August 1st because we're determining the federal government overstepped its boundaries. That is a real win for the rule of law, and it's more than half the country, more than half the states in the country, and that's a significant win.
Wow. So right now there's been a stay issued, and we're holding on. What are we holding on for until they determine what exactly?
So we are waiting until this goes to the Supreme Court, and the Department of Justice under the Biden administration has filed for an emergency stay application. They want to see whether or not the injunction in the states, including the state of Missouri, and Missouri is one of the lead plaintiffs in these cases, they have asked for the Supreme Court to essentially weigh in and lift the stay of injunction. They've asked the Supreme Court to say, you need to lift this injunction. My guess, based on the composition of the Supreme Court, the way they interpret the law, is that it's going to be very, very difficult to essentially stay that injunction. This is coming up from Missouri, Tennessee, Louisiana, among others. It is on what we call the rocket docket or the emergency petition, the shadow docket. They officially convene on the 1st of October, but importantly, they will be considering this particular case in what's called the Long Conference on September 30th, when they all convene together. And this is the last determination they make about whether this is a case they will take for the full term in October of 2024, leading into 2025. So, Rich, there are a lot of moving pieces here, but for the sort of sake of analysis, there are at least half the states in the country who have gotten a reprieve from Title IX, including almost 700 colleges and universities of higher education. And that's honestly good news for the rule of law.
Wow. Yeah, it's working. It's showing the system is working, and thank God for that. And you can't just, the bureaucrats can't just do what they want by rewriting a few words in a law and just change the whole sense of the law. Which, I mean, this is probably one of the most, from a black and white, commonsensical standpoint, this is probably one of the craziest things I've ever seen. A law that was designed to protect women is now being used to hurt women. Just fascinating.
It really does rewind the clock, Rich. And listen, I've benefited from Title IX. I have been able to attend graduate school and get a law degree. My daughter is going to college on a volleyball scholarship, on a D2 volleyball scholarship. I have been a benefit. My daughter has been a benefit of Title IX. But listen, this was one of the sort of crowning achievements of the women's liberation movement. But now we see conservatives really standing the line on what sex means. Sex means male and female. And yet you and I understand that this was never in essentially debate. And yet, at 2024, on sort of the cusp of 2025, this is a situation where we have to admit that the left has garnered, has appropriated to itself the notion of biological sex and is now adopting for itself the language that sex is assigned at birth and not something that is simply recognized at birth. This is something, if conservatives, and you and I understand this, that conservatives do not stand up and push back against, and Title IX is really the pinnacle of those protected federal civil rights laws. If we don't push back against it, we stand to lose 52, at the very least, 52 years of civil rights progress.
Wow. Well, hopefully cooler heads will prevail, and that won't be the case. Sarah Parshall Perry, can you stick around for a few more minutes and tell us what's going on with the legal stuff surrounding gender medicine?
I sure can.
All right, stick with me, because I just saw this op-ed, of all places, in the New York Times with the headline, "Why is the U.S. still pretending we know gender-affirming care even works?" And I thought that was an odd place to find it. So stick with me. I want to get your reaction to that from the legal side. Folks, we're coming right back with Sarah Parshall Perry from the Heritage Foundation.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Rich Valdez, who, again, will do a fine job, and I know you'll enjoy listening to him.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. We continue our late night national town hall conversation with me, Rich Valdez. Make sure you check me out on social media if you can, at Rich Valdez. I put exclusive stuff on Instagram, so if you want to see what's going on, just click on my picture and it'll show you the Instagram stories, and you'll get a little insight into what's going on there. But our phone number, 833-482-5337 is the number to call if you want to get in before the end of this hour. We're going to be going to your calls right after this. Our guest is Sarah Parshall Perry. She is with the Heritage Foundation and the Ed Meese Center there. And this is interesting. Sarah Parshall Perry, again, I'm going to reread this to you. Why is the U.S. still pretending we know gender-affirming care works? And I thought it was an interesting op-ed for, a title for an op-ed. And it goes into, being critical of that. And, okay, granted, they get one right every now and again. But what's happening on the legal front with respect to that?
Well, we can talk, first of all, about what's happening in the developed Western nations, right? So the Indians and Irish sort of studies have completely disenfranchised what's happening in medical analysis in the United States. And they have said, and the House report, as you know, Rich, has been sort of one of the most significant detriment to the gender medicine onslaught. And ultimately, in the end, it has determined that not only is hormone and cross-sex surgery detrimental to individuals who are minors, but many of them have, by sort of comorbid mental health diagnoses, and these individuals are not actually being treated for their underlying conditions. I mean, it is significant. As the mother of 3 teenagers, Rich, I have 15, 17, and one that just turned 20. It is significant to me that I think they're understanding simply what they're being told.
Sarah, I don't want to interrupt you, but I don't know if you have a radio on, but I'm getting some feedback. Maybe get closer to the phone, or I don't know if there's a radio on and it's feeding back.
Yeah, so this is really one of the situations, Rich, where I feel fully that sort of undervalued when we are coming to the consideration of how these kids who the UCLA School of Law, their Williams Institute, has determined 13 to 17-year-olds, that's the largest growing contingent, fastest growing contingent. They are the ones that are most often and fastest expressing themselves as being transgender. How they are coming to this particular conclusion.
Wow.
And the fact of the matter is, these individuals are being proselytized by social contagion and social media and individuals in positions of power in government, and they are so susceptible to all of these societal factors that parents are being disenfranchised from being able to essentially direct their own children's lives. Now, there have been 26 states that have passed bans on what we call gender affirming, and I'm using very big air quotes, Rich, on gender affirming care for minors. Now, these are individuals who cannot vote. They cannot buy tobacco, alcohol. They cannot be drafted. They cannot sign a contract. And yet, we are being told by the progressive left, these individuals are ultimately in a position where if they tell you that they are a transgender individual, that is sufficient to give them a voluntary double mastectomy or a voluntary penelectomy. And Rich, you and I understand we are of such an age that we understand what it's like to have kids of this age. And of course, I think about this with my 3 children, and I think I am the person that needs to stand in the gap for them. We are essentially fighting this tooth and nail. My colleague and I have written a white paper on this, the constitutionality of the state gender medicine bans for minors, and how this is fully within a state's power under the 10th Amendment to the Constitution to basically say we can legislate. We can legislate on medicine. We can legislate to protect minor and vulnerable populations. And if it goes to the Supreme Court, that's fine. That is exactly what we've seen, Rich. We now see that the Supreme Court has granted review in a case called United States versus Scrimeti. They will be determining the constitutionality of the state medicine gender ban in the state of Tennessee and whether or not that is a violation of the Equal Protection Clause and discrimination. It is very significant that we're headed into an election season. Rich, we don't know what will happen post November 5th. But my urgent request is that the next administration holds the line and says we are maintaining our request that the Supreme Court clarify for us, is this discrimination to essentially limit these procedures to individuals over 18. My colleague and I have written on this. As I said, it is patently constitutional. 26 states have enacted these bans, thank God, but they are being challenged top to bottom. And honestly, in the end, Rich, this is going to be a determination for the Supreme Court.
Mm-hmm. Seems like nowadays everything ends up there because there's so many
Honestly, it does.
activist judges.
Does. 100%. And the judiciary, you and I know, Rich, the judiciary is literally the last sort of edifice, the sort of stalwart backstop of what happens when you can gain control of the legislature and the executive, but you cannot contain the judiciary. And the judiciary is the only non-political branch that the founders determined was to be separate from the other two branches. We are a tripartite system of government. It is honestly, in the end, something the Supreme Court will have to weigh in on. And it's something I think you and I and your listeners need to pray for, that these justices do what is right. They apply the law as it is written, and they take things from a non-political perspective and make sure that states have the opportunity to enforce these particular laws as they see fit.
Outstanding. Sarah Parshall Perry, thank you for being with us tonight. Folks, give her a follow. Check out her work at heritage.org. Sarah, you are a gentlewoman, a scholar, and a patriot. I thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
Keep up the great work. Thank you. And folks, we come right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So last night, our president addressed the nation, and he showed once again what true leadership looks like. He really did. His words were poignant. You know, I'll speak in a moment about the importance of reminding people of history, teaching America's true history. He thinks and talks about his work and our country, understanding what it means in terms of what we do now and how that will impact the future. He thinks about our history in the context of the importance of the work we do now. And over the past 3.5 years and over his entire career, Joe has led with grace and strength and bold vision and deep compassion.
And that, of course, is Vice President Kamala Harris at a teachers union, American Federation AFT gathering in Houston. A big speech that she gave today. We got a few more clips from that. But she wants to praise Biden for his true leadership based on his performance last night. Now, I woke up to, we heard that clip yesterday. We heard some of the audio. We played it, but I had not seen it yesterday. I saw it today. And everybody was saying, Biden's a robot. He's this, he's that. There was some computer glitch behind him. Others were saying it's just a teleprompter and a reflection in the window. People are just so, they will believe anything except the truth lately. Anyway, Biden sucks and he read a teleprompter. All right, folks, we're coming right back. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Your liberty-loving Latino amigo, happy to be here with you till 1 a.m. Eastern Time. Until then, feel free to give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And you've got multiple House Democrats have voted with Republicans today to condemn Kamala Harris for her border czar role failures. We'll get into that in a little bit. 39% of independents believe that Harris is qualified to actually be president. That's a YouGov poll. Then you got a Rasmussen poll that shows no bump for Harris, even though yesterday there was all these different surveys, one-day-long surveys that were showing the race being within 2 points of each other. Today, Trump is ahead by 7 in this Rasmussen poll, 50-43. Then you've got Hunter Biden's legal team getting blasted by a judge for making false statements in the California tax case. That Hunter Biden, he can't help but get in trouble. Then El Trumpito, then Aldous Magnus, the 45th president of these United States, he says that we should not use the 25th Amendment on Joe Biden because Kamala would be dangerous and much worse. You got to love that. And Director Wray of the FBI was getting grilled by members of the House Oversight Committee yesterday, and he says he did not know why some of the Secret Service members made the decision to allow Trump on stage when there was, in fact, a threat that they knew about. Listen to this.
We don't know the answer to that, but I want to be clear, and this is important because I think it goes to questions that I can and cannot answer. Our investigation, the FBI's mandate, is focused on the shooter and all things related to his attack. Now, obviously, I understand very much the intense interest and focus on the Secret Service's performance, actions, decision-making, et cetera. There are two separate after-action reviews, the DHS Inspector General and the outside independent panel that's been convened that are focused on that. Now, our investigation will obviously overlap with that.
Here's the problem. We're out 13 days, and you say we've been disclosing. You know, we had the director, the colonel from the Pennsylvania State Police in front of Homeland yesterday. He was quite candid. He disclosed to us that Butler Emergency Services Unit personnel were posted into the windows on the second floor of the AGR building, that they left there to go pursue the person that they spotted, Crooks, that they texted a photo of Crooks to the PSP representative in the command center. That information was relayed to the United States Secret Service. They asked that it be texted to someone else. That was many minutes before President Trump took the stand. What we don't know is why were they not keeping him off the stand?
All excellent questions, and to me, we need more investigating, more questions being asked, more questions being answered. There's so much to know, and we really haven't gotten to the bottom of it at all. And somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of this is Reid Rubinstein. He's the vice president of America First Legal, and he was Deputy Associate Attorney General at the United States Department of Education. He was General Counsel as well. And senior advisor to the Secretary of the Treasury. So a lot of experience in government as well as his experience working with America First. Reid Rubinstein, welcome.
Thank you, Rich. Thank you. And good evening. It's a pleasure to join you.
Likewise. Thank you. And listening to Director Wray fumble these answers and never really have an answer, like, I guess you're used to hearing bureaucrats if you've done, legal work in the government, but it's always frustrating for me to hear that. And likely he's a lawyer and he was coached by lawyers as well to not answer a lot. But it's very frustrating, right, to hear these bureaucrats just get into bureaucrat speak, deep state speak, And we, the American people, were lost. You know, we don't know what's going on. We don't know why they let President Trump on this stage. If they knew there was a threat, some reports say an hour, some say 3 hours, some say 26 minutes. What do you know, and what's going on with these investigations?
Oh, goodness gracious. It's always a pleasure to listen to our friends from the FBI. Kind of on a run these past number of years, starting with the you remember the Fort Hood shooting in November of 2000?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, boy, they've missed a number of them, and it was kind of interesting to listen to Mr. Ray bob and weave. You'd have thought he was talking about Russia collusion almost. Yeah, so what do we know? Right now, not very much. And that's, fundamentally the reason why AFL has opened up a kind of a multi-front investigation, is the best way to characterize it, into the government's response to the attempted assassination of President Trump and the murder of Mr. Comparator and the wounding of two others at that rally in Butler.
Mm-hmm.
We are asking for 7, 8, 9, actually, different categories of records. We're trying to get to the bottom, for example, of resource allocation questions that have arisen. Public reporting suggests that there were requests from components of the Secret Service for additional resources to fulfill protective missions, and that these may have been rejected by DHS and possibly by the Secret Service, the highest leadership levels of the Secret Service. And frankly, the American people deserve to know if this is the case.
Right. Now, I just want to follow up here. When you say the highest leadership, are you talking about this woman who resigned, Miss Kimberly, I forget her name now, or above her, Cheadle?
Well, so look, ultimately the buck stops with the DHS secretary.
Huh.
And the Secret Service is a component of DHS. And if the Secretary of DHS says we're going to devote X amount of resources to protecting former presidents, we're going to devote X plus 2 to protecting, Jill Biden when she goes to lunch. I mean, in some respects, it is a zero-sum game. There are only so many agents. And we want to be clear. The Secret Service does, on the ground, the agents, they do a tremendous job. They are literally prepared to lay down their life to protect, to carry out their mission and to protect, in the case of Butler, it would have been former President Trump. And they should absolutely have the best available equipment and every resource at their disposal to ensure that their protectees are in fact, protected. And the concern certainly that we have and others we know in Congress and other observers of the Secret Service have is that there has been a kind of a decay of the mission, so to speak, and a decay of focus.
Within the organization.
Not in other words, it's not on the kind of lying Secret Service agents. They're not the people deciding how many agents are going to be devoted.
Right. They just show up and work.
Right. They show up and do their job. And DHS, for example, has dedicated unprecedented resources to facilitating the mass entry of illegal aliens. Given what's going on at our borders, there have been all sorts of stories about the agency redeploying all sorts of agents, redeploying, for example, air marshals to go and process.
You're right? Reading my mind. Somebody sent me a text about that today, and they said, "What's the story? There's no more marshals on planes. They're at the border." Apparently, that's going on.
Right. Well, that seems to be going on, and these reports over a period of years raise obvious questions that need to be answered. Who ultimately, for example, is calling the shots? Why were, for example, so many agents dedicated to protecting Joe Biden at lunch relative to the agents who were protecting the former president at an outdoor rally? There are a host of concerns here, and once you get beyond those obvious questions, then you can go a little bit deeper. We're running a case, actually just settled, where the Biden-Harris DHS created what it called an intel group, an intelligence advisory group. They set this thing up illegally, and as a result of our lawsuit, they shut it down, and we were, as part of the deal to end the lawsuit, they agreed to provide us records, minutes of meetings, and so forth.
Well, now, just to clarify, this group that they set up, this intelligence working group, is this of intelligence professionals that work for the government, outside of the government, a combination thereof?
They're outside. These are outside individuals, people who form for the government. You may have heard of a guy named John Brennan.
Oh,
you may have heard James Clapper.
Oh, gosh, it gets worse.
Yeah, well, but the reason it has relevance and salience and importance with respect to this story is that Brennan, Clapper, and their other colleagues, and it's very clear from the records of their meetings. It's also clear from documents the Biden administration has been making public since, I want to say, June of 21. They view, be blunt about it, Trump supporters as domestic terror threats.
Yeah.
By virtue of the fact they support the former president. And the agencies have devoted tremendous resources for dealing with this perceived threat. Why, for example, is the FBI chasing Catholics who go to a Latin mass?
Unbelievable.
Right? We saw that in Virginia. Now, Christopher Wray says, "Oh no, nothing to see here. It was just some rogue person in the Virginia field office who did something that they shouldn't." Well, maybe, but if you read their other public, what they've said publicly, and there are all classified versions, for example, of a domestic terrorism national security strategy that came out in June of 21. We haven't seen those, but it's very clear who they were targeting. Can you imagine if DHS's resources and focus had been on, for example, protecting former President Trump and stopping bad actors like Matthew Crooks instead of targeting the American people more generally?
Right. People going to church instead of guys climbing roofs to shoot at Trump. Reid Rubinstein, I got to take a pause right here. I want to come right back, and I want to hold that thought. Folks, we're on with Reid Rubinstein, Vice President of America First Legal. They do some amazing work in conjunction with the America First movement, and we're going to learn a little bit more about that when we come back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. This is America. This is Night. This is Rich Valdez.
All right, America, welcome back. Familia, we continue our discussion with Reid Rubinstein, Vice President at America First Legal, and we're talking about how the bureaucrats do what they want. The Biden administration put together this illegal intel group with former CIA Director Brennan, former DNI General John Clapper. And these guys are, in my opinion, the shadiest of the shady. And it was their, 51 intelligence friends that said that the Hunter Biden laptop was fake, phony, fraud, Russian propaganda, and turned out to be the realest thing ever. Reid Rubinstein, we were talking about how the government was going after folks for going, Catholics for going to Latin Mass, but ignoring domestic terrorists like Matthew Crooks, who took aim at President Trump and nearly took his head off.
Yeah, and it's, again, I want to emphasize a couple of things here. Number one, the issues of the management failure at DHS and at the Secret Service, these are not partisan questions. This should concern every American, no matter their political affiliation, because if the government is not playing things down the middle, what you're going to see is a massive erosion of trust. And once the federal government loses the trust of the average American, person's trust that it's going to carry out its job in a nonpartisan and competent and capable manner, there are all sorts of ills. And what really needs to be, in my view, there are two primary issues that need to be exposed and addressed. Full transparency. Number one, who made the decisions about staffing and resources for the Secret Service on the former president's detail? We need to know if it was, a decision at the highest echelons, which, it may well have been, and whether that decision reflects the politicization or the weaponization of our, Secret Service. And the second question that absolutely must be answered, and for which there must be accountability, is whether or not the animus, the prejudice, the disregard that the James Clapper and John Brennans of the world had for the former president, same kind of feelings, by the way, that led to the weaponization of the FBI in 2016 and beyond.
Sure.
Whether or not that has, that evil continues to permeate the DHS and its components. We have to
And the
find
Secret
out.
Service. Right, because otherwise then it's compromised.
Yeah, and look, the average, Joe, the average Jane who shows up for work at the Secret Service, they're great people. And we got to make sure that their management lives up to them. And the evidence, at least up to now, suggests that management failed them, it failed the president, it failed all of us.
Outstanding analysis. Great questions. Reid Rubinstein, let everybody that's listening know how they can keep up to speed with the wonderful work that you guys are doing at America First Legal.
Well, goodness, thank you for those kind words. So you can find us at www.aflegal.org. We are on X. I believe we are on Facebook and Instagram, and but our X account is particularly active and frankly, in my opinion, outstanding in terms of putting material out there. And God bless you for what you do, Rich, every night. And God bless your listeners. We're at an inflection point in many respects, and this is our government, it's our country.
Yeah, amen to that. Reid Rubinstein, I want to thank you for being here. You are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot. I hope that you'll come back and stay up late with us another night and keep us up to speed. I appreciate it. Folks, we're coming right back. And we're going to get to your calls and more in Open Phone America at the top of the hour. But we have some more conversation coming up. Don't move a muscle. I'm Rich Valdez.
Now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, familia, welcome back, amigos. And check this out. We were just talking about how the government has been weaponized in many ways. against conservatives. You've seen Catholics that are getting targeted by the Department of Homeland Security for going to Latin Mass and being labeled as radicals. You've got parents that are at concerned parents that are at school board meetings getting labeled as violent domestic extremists. And this weaponization of the government against the people is a trend that dates back to, I don't know, England, right? And the reason for our independence. But ultimately, it's rearing its ugly head. And there's a book out there called The Weaponization of the IRS Against Conservatives, right? I mean, it's not what it's called, but that's what it's about, and appropriately named, right? And these are things we got to look at, right? The book, Domestic Enemies, The Founding Fathers and the Fight Against the Left, is the book by Daniel Greenfield, who's executive vice president over at the Horowitz Freedom Center. And these things, I think, are important. If we don't talk about them in the regular discourse of, the news of the day, then we talk about them in hindsight about when they actually happen, right? When they go after Trump, when they've indicted him, when they've done the Russian collusion Mueller case, when they've used the pen register to spy on him. All sorts of government overreach that we've seen. And I know some people listening think, well, that's just Trump because, he's orange man bad. And, man, I'd tap his phones too, anything to keep that guy out of office. But the problem is once you allow it to happen to Trump with impunity, it's going to happen to you and me in the same manner. So I want to get into this with Daniel Greenfield. Welcome, sir.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, and you're completely correct.
What do you think this 81 billion or 80 whatever amount of money they spent, and they got these 88,000 new agents in the IRS, and they claim no, but don't worry, we're only going after the filthy rich, the top 1%, the billionaires that don't pay their bills, which there aren't even that many of them. I can't help but think that they're going to use those people to come after us. And it eerily is reminiscent to, this taxation without representation that kind of sparked this whole party. What say you?
Absolutely. And the funny thing about that, they wanted $80 billion to modernize the IRS. They had to settle for $60 billion. They claimed they were going to hire all these agents. In reality, they were planning to hire this year, I believe, 33,700 agents. Do you know how many they hired? They hired 34. So as usual, the government is not actually telling the truth about where the money is going. And yes, they were promising to go after all the rich people, all the billionaires. Reality is that 2/3 of the people targeted with audits are still the middle class because the middle class is where the money is. They were bragging that they got $1 billion in revenue from wealthier people. $60 billion for $1 billion is not remotely a good return on investment. You get a better return on investment if you just put that money into a high-yield savings account, which, of course, is the one thing the government will never do. So the IRS is absolutely doing exactly what it's been doing all along. They wanted that money to run the organization the way they have before, and they are absolutely using that organization to go after conservatives. And this is actually something that's referenced in the Declaration of Independence. We had the 4th of July not all that long ago, and one of the complaints there is that they sent a swarm of officials to eat our substance, and we have a swarm of officials that would make King George III turn white.
Yeah, that's funny. And Daniel Greenfield, you look at this, and we look at just the current news, right? You look at these investigations I just talked about recently. That there's several investigations now going into this attempted assassination of former President Trump, and rightfully so. But the fact that we had these failures in security, or what some are thinking was an inside job, a setup, and this, that, and the other. The point is, ultimately, the government is failing we the people. And it almost seems like we the people are subservient to the government rather than being vice versa like it's supposed to be.
It's tragically true, and it's not surprising because the government is terrible at everything except collecting money and seizing power. It's terrible at its actual functions. The Secret Service, like every other agency, is absolutely a failure at doing the jobs that it's supposed to be doing. Law enforcement agencies have failed to stop crime. The Environmental Protection Agency has failed to stop actual pollution as opposed to going after carbon. Name a federal agency and you'll find that it has absolutely failed in its stated mission, but it succeeded in its mission of growing the government. And that's really what the government is there for. It's there to get bigger and bigger and resist any efforts to hold it in check. So the Supreme Court recently struck down Chevron deference, which allowed federal agencies to write their own rules and interpret their own statutes. And Senator Elizabeth Warren just came out now with a bill to take away power from Congress to actually define what federal agencies do, to take away power from the courts so people can actually sue and courts can actually limit it and give it back to the bureaucracy. And she claims, this will put the expert agencies in charge. And this is exactly what the Americans were fighting for back in the day. Back in the day against British officials who were the expert agencies of the time.
Wow. And I get it. Look, when you fail to teach people history or sabotage their learning of history, you're bound to repeat the errors of history because you don't know. So history repeats itself. But we're in this, in my opinion, a precarious place where we have people that are almost begging for this to happen, right? Elizabeth Warren is not an unpopular senator. She's got a following. People love to hear her rhetoric and they enjoy it. And I find that scary.
Well, we have a large class of government workers who themselves are a constituency. I've been looking at unions, for example, the Federation of Government Workers. You look at D.C. and its various bedroom communities, and there is this entire elite of people who are in theory government employees, but in practice are government overlords.
Unbelievable. Now, before we wrap with you, I just wanted to get your take on something foreign policy, but I guess it happened here domestically, where we have the Prime Minister of Israel, Bibi Netanyahu, in town, meeting with Vice President Kamala Harris and President Biden, and just all sorts of crazy stuff that happened yesterday. But they had their sit down today. What's your initial take on this powwow?
Prime Minister Netanyahu came in and gave what sounded a whole lot like a State of the Union address, which we haven't heard in a while, unfortunately. Then he sits down with a woman who is unclear. This is an issue not just for Netanyahu, for Israel, but for world leaders in general. Who is actually running the United States government? Is it President Biden? Is it Vice President Kamala Harris? Netanyahu doesn't entirely know, and I don't think entirely world leaders know, and our enemies don't know. And when they feel that there's this huge power vacuum, we've got a guy in the Oval Office who himself, and Democrats have themselves made a compelling case that he's unfit to actually run things. And then you've got a number two who's untried, untested, but in theory doesn't even have presidential powers. So our enemies are certainly seeing opportunities. Our friends like Israel are very worried.
Yeah, good point. Daniel Greenfield, let everybody know how they can get a copy of the book and learn more about the work that you're doing.
Well, Domestic Enemies is available in pretty much any bookstore, online or offline. And I have the honor of working for David Horowitz at the David Horowitz Freedom Center, and you can see our work at frontpagemag.com.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Godspeed to you, sir. You bet. And folks, we're coming right back. Your calls and more are coming up. I'm going to do a couple of calls before we get into Open Phone America. So if you want to call in, the number is 833-482-5337. I also want to bring you a couple of clips from the meeting with Netanyahu and Biden, as well as some Kamala Harris. We got so much Kamala Harris audio to play for you that I think you're going to enjoy, plus a couple other ones. We've got a few interesting ones out there. So don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
America to the liberty-loving Latino, Rich Valdez.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
So I just had a frank and constructive meeting with Prime Minister Netanyahu. I told him that I will always ensure that Israel is able to defend itself, including from Iran and Iran-backed militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah.
So that is Vice President Kamala Harris saying she supports Israel, while moments later she was with the protesters, giving them kudos and a big up. We'll play that audio shortly. And, of course, she's the border czar. So, she's saying things like, don't come, stay. Fantastic policy. That she's terrific. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on everything that's going on tonight. 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. Let's see, where do we go? Let's go to Ocean Beach, California. Check in with Dan, who's listening on richvaldez.com. Go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. Thanks for taking my call. What I wanted to explore was Kamala Harris's inaction as border czar is quite likely personal. And I say that because the immigration file of her parents has been posted online. There's a website that has it, KamalaHarrisIneligible.com, and it's also circulating on X. And the main point here is that Kamala's own mother was docketed for deportation in 1967. This followed repeated acts of fraud that she committed in the 60s when she was present on a student visa leading up to and after Kamala's own birth in 1964. Kamala later colluded. Yeah, there was a cover-up. The family continued to commit fraud. They committed several cover-ups that are documented. Kamala later colluded with the cover-ups by committing perjury on a petition to get her mother re-entered to the country in 1985.
Was she charged with perjury anywhere? This is all news to me.
Charged? No, but it's factual, yes. It's called birth certificate fraud. You may be aware that she received two separate birth certificates, one with the middle name Iyer and the second one with the name she uses, Devi. And the timing of that birth certificate revision was right around the time that she was required to be registered with the government as an alien child in early 1965. There was a program that required it at the time. She was born under the 1952 Immigration Act, and the terms are quite different than what we have now after 1965. But to make a long story short, it's been posted online.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate it. I remember this being a big topic of concern when she ran for president, and she didn't win. And then when Biden picked her as vice president, and it was all over the media, and it was everywhere. And it's back, right? Because she's running again. And I'm sure for decades after she serves in office, people will continue to make these same claims. But the reality is that she got in, right? She got in, and I can't imagine all of a sudden now somebody's saying, "Oh, look, but wait, there's more." And the reality is, I guess I'll take a look at it and see what we can learn from it. But I don't think that there's any smoking gun here that's going to stop her from being the sitting vice president of the United States and precluding her from running. Worse things have happened, like what she's done at the border. And I think that's the biggest issue, right? Like you said, Dan, her inaction at the border is really the worst or the biggest or most egregious indictment of her ability to serve as a leader in this country is that. That's the proof. We have that. We have then her inability to really articulate and really kind of tell the story that she has to tell. It's always very Bidenish. She pulls a lot of Bidens. So I don't know that we need to say Kamala Harris is an illegal alien and she's not eligible to run or this or that. She's running and she's got hundreds of millions of dollars in the bank, and I don't think anybody's stopping that momentum except for Donald Trump winning the presidency. And I think he will, should he stay on message and keep his momentum going. But Dan, thank you for the call from Ocean Beach, California. Always appreciate hearing interesting factoids like that. And we'll continue with the rest of your calls and more straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, America, welcome back. And I want to continue with your phone calls as we head into open phone across America. Open phones, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And let's see, where do we go? We're going to go to Atlanta, Georgia. And we're going to check in with Larry. Larry, go right ahead.
Hey, Rich. I was talking with my wife also earlier, and the one thing I didn't like was Trump's pick on Vance right off the bat, because I think I like Trump, but a lot of people would think he's abrasive, and I believe Vance is even more abrasive, and that's just not a good combination. And I think he's going to turn off more voters than help. You know, they've already brought in where he said about the cat ladies run into the government like AOC and Kamala Harris that don't have children. That just turns off a lot of people. That there's many people who want children and can't have them. That's going to turn those off, and that's who Jennifer Aniston.
Do you think they were originally voting for Trump anyway?
Well, I think
because my thinking is, like you just said it, right? You said Trump is abrasive. So if Trump is abrasive and he's got a guy that's pretty much just like him, then it kind of cancels out, right? It's not like you're alienating any new people. You've already alienated them because Trump is that way. So I don't know that, and this is not a defense of Vance by any means. I'm just saying I don't think it's as if. I think it would be if Trump were a super sweet guy all the time, then you get this Vance that's abrasive, and then you go, oh my, Trump's so nice to them and they like him. But now you've got Vance being so abrasive, they might jump ship and not vote for Trump because they don't like Vance. But the reality is the people who aren't going to vote for Trump because of Vance probably weren't voting for Trump anyway.
That's true. I know a lot of times they say the vice president that really doesn't help or hurt, except like I think
it can. I think Mike Pence was a very big help for Trump. Trump was not the juggernaut that he is now when he ran last time, and he needed, he was the Billy Bush tape, right? He was this New York playboy real estate magnate. That at least that's how they tried to paint him, and having this Bible Belt conservative from Indiana, Mike Pence gave him this credibility that an establishment Republican who was conservative, who was from Congress. And an effective communicator, it was the perfect counterbalance for the ticket. Made sense at the time. And now I think it's a different thing. And again, I truly believe he picked Vance. And, some have disagreed with me, but I don't care. I still think the same thing, that he picked Vance because Vance is good at making the argument of, I too didn't like Trump, and I didn't like him, and here's why. And then you've seen me call him names, and you've seen me call him everything under the sun. And eventually I came around because I learned this or I learned that. And he can make an effective, persuasive case for why he himself is supporting Trump. And that's what campaigning 101 is all about.
If he stays on message, I think that would help him. The big thing today was he had a speech that he was talking about, I think parents should have more voting power than single people because parents are so important. And parents are important. I'm a parent. And parents are important, but I think you don't want to turn off voters, and that's that part. Just talk about their issues that the Democrats have, and I think they would take them. But when they start alienating voters, that's a whole different issue.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just going to say I think I tend to look at things the way you do also. But I can say Trump became president because he made a speech in Trump Tower. He said, I'm running for president because they're not sending us their best in Mexico. They're sending us their rapists, their murderers. And it was the biggest, most controversial thing. And ultimately, he wins because that's actually what people wanted to hear. It was the truth. Thank you, Larry, for the call. Big shout out, WGKA, Rich Valdez, coming right back.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the third hour of the program. Hour number 3, Open Phone America is what we call it here. 833-4825-337, 833-4-Valdez. And I'm with you live until 1 a.m. Looking forward to speaking with you. The phone lines are open. We got a few people on hold, and I want to share a few thoughts with you on some of the headlines of today. And, of course, there was a meeting. Benjamin Netanyahu was sitting down with Kamala Harris and Joe El Baboso Biden today in Washington, D.C. This follows this crazy riot yesterday, riot/protest, whatever they're going to call it. And listen, I'm always the first one to say, look, I don't have to agree with what you're saying, but I defend your right to say it. I let people talk. I believe in free speech. The Supreme Court decided that burning flags is a free speech activity, but that's when you're burning your own flag, right? That doesn't mean you're allowed to steal flags that are up on flagpoles, bring them down, and then torch them. That's not allowed. And kudos to all of the congressmen that showed up and, with new flags and put them back up at Union Station in Washington, D.C. yesterday. But I don't want to be misconstrued in my commentary, right? I think some people might think, you're just too fair. No, I'm not trying to be too fair. I'm trying to be fair. And again, I want to support the Constitution. I don't think that you're allowed to go, you know who got in trouble for that? A guy named Enrique Tarrio. Remember him? President of the Proud Boys. He got in trouble for that January 6th. Took down, I believe it was a BLM, Black Lives Matter flag. And I believe it was that. And off of a building, might have been a church building. And they arrested him for stealing this flag that wasn't his. Not for what happened with it later or anything like that, just for taking it. So these guys, I think, should be prosecuted. The FBI, whoever it is, DC Metro Police, they should find out who were these perpetrators. And let's do this. But we saw the video. The people that got arrested were let right out the other side of the door. I guess after being given what they call in New York City a desk appearance ticket, also known as a disappearance ticket, because once you get it, you never come back. And that is part of the problem. We need to be part of the solution. So I appreciate everybody who's sending me things on everything that's happening, because I'm trying to keep up to speed with a lot of this stuff. A lot of stories here. Listen to this, how the left massages headlines to make it seem normal. Cost of living crisis hits the sales of food, cars, and luxury goods. Now, you see a headline like that, and you think, yeah, no, that's true. The cost of living has really gone up, boy. Woo. It's not called cost of living crisis. It's called inflation. And it's because of government spending. And it's just fascinating to me. My girlfriend, I guess she's my ex-girlfriend, or we're on a break or something like that. But a few months ago, she said something. She was like, yeah, that was before everything in the world went up in price. And I thought to myself, interesting way of looking at it, right? And it's not wrong, right? Everything in the world did go up in price. And it was everywhere. It was global. It was all over. So people tend to think, and that's a big thing. People say, inflation, but it's global. So who cares? That doesn't mean, lots of things are global. The pandemic was global. I wasn't going to sit here and yell at the Prime Minister of Italy for the way he handled his thing. You criticize him, you move on. My issue was the idiots in New York. Bottom line, right? At the time, Bill, what did I call him? Bill El Bobo. Bill El Bobo de Blasio. And then now we have Elite Eric Adams. Elite Eric Adams is his predecessor. And that's just how that goes, right? These people mishandled things. They screwed things up. And they're trying to now blame it on life, the cost of living crisis, and how that's hitting the sales of food, cars, and luxury goods. Yeah, I think the crisis is called Joe Biden, his policies, his inflation. And once we get rid of him and those policies and, handle it, we'll be better. But crazy to think that this is how the media positions these things. What else we got? Listen to this one. Kids, growing number of Americans say, no thanks. Fascinating, right? And this is AOC and the rest of the gang that they glorify this not having kids thing. Let me see who put this one together. Oh, that's not that interesting. But yeah, it's a growing number of people that aren't interested in having kids. Why? I couldn't wait, honestly. I had kids, 2 kids by the time I was 24 or 25, I think. And I don't regret that at all. So if there's any regret that I might have is not having more kids when I was younger. So my kids could have been like, 3 or 4 kids as opposed to just 2, the 2 daughters that I had. Anyway, let me see. I want to get to a couple of calls here. I don't want to keep people waiting too long. And by you people, I mean Gil. Gil in Manila, Philippines. He's online listening in. Gil, what's going on, brother?
Well,
a little louder. You're far away.
I'm in an evacuation center.
Oh, wow.
Better?
Yeah, keep up that volume. You're in an evacuation center. What happened?
Well, flood. Yeah, I've been here, this will be 3rd day. A great part of Manila was flooded. The president declared this area.
Now, was the flooding from rain or like a tidal wave, a tsunami, or what's going on? Why are you flooded, Gil?
Rain. Rain left over from a typhoon that passed. It didn't pass through here, but we got the effect.
Wow. That stinks.
And that isn't really why I called. I'm upset about our friend Mayor Giuliani being disbarred.
Yeah, me too.
And I hadn't heard you mention that, and I know he's a friend of yours.
Yeah.
If I may, I'm not much of a conspiracy theorist, but I do have one about this.
Go for it.
The fellow pulling the strings was also impeached. He was also disbarred, and he lives with his wife in Chappaqua, New York.
I know 2 people that live there. 3.
Yeah, well, I think the impeachments of President Trump and now the disbarment of Mr. Giuliani that's where the conspiracy starts, right there. And you notice who were the first people to endorse Kamala, Bill, and Hillary? They wanted it into the new administration so they could have some influence to pass. All that's going on in Haiti recently, the Clinton Foundation has done absolutely nothing.
Oh, I think you're 100% right. And listen, I don't know that you're 100% right about the conspiracy angle of it, but I do know Bill and Hillary jumped on board to do that for, I think, a number of reasons. One, because people are going to look to them as a former, president, first lady, who ran against Trump and lost, and ran again and lost. And these are go-to people for our media. But I don't know if it was because of all of those reasons, but I think those are interesting reasons to explore. But ultimately, the main thing for them is they're power players, and I don't think they ever want to really relinquish any of the power. They love to be involved, just like I think Barack Obama loves to be involved. On the contrary, and people will take me to task on this and say, oh, they're the worst offenders and blah blah blah. But I can tell you, I feel like George W. Bush, even if he is involved, he doesn't look like he's involved. Right? He seems to be very hands-off. You don't see him getting involved in a ton of things politically, maybe a fundraiser here and there, but it's not like, he retired and stayed living in Georgetown or somewhere in D.C. like Obama did. which is odd, and it's always been odd, and I think it's questionable, right? And again, you could live where you want, but there's tradition. Presidents move away, and they live a good life, and they, happily ever after. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that one, Gil, but I do want to say I wish you and your family the best. I want to encourage the praying part of our audience to keep everybody in the Philippines in our prayers as you guys deal with this flooding situation, because it doesn't sound good. Doesn't sound good. A lot of swishing going on over there. Gil in Manila, Philippines, thank you for the call, my brother. We're going to continue our conversation. Open phones across America straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So, Kamala Harris, que mala eres. She's been the talk of the town today, trying to dominate the headlines. And hey, we're going to help her out. We're going to talk about her. We're going to get your reactions to her and everything else that's going on. And, of course, the phone number, 833-4VALDEZ. I want to get to your calls. Let me see. I feel like we were in the middle of something when we got the call before. But let's go to Ron. Ron is in Colton, Alabama, streaming us online, richvaldez.com. Go right ahead, Ron.
Yes, sir. This is Coleman, Alabama. I appreciate you taking my call. I hadn't been able to pick you up for a couple of weeks. They've got someone else on.
Unbelievable.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, because I've been listening to you for a while. It's hard to find anyone that hardly talks, makes sense, and also...
Well, thank you,
I
Ron.
really appreciate that time that you said that you had been wrong, and that's very rare, so... Now,
yes, there was one time that I was wrong. That's true.
Well, you admitted it. That's the thing. That folks ain't going to hardly admit it. Especially that's the commentators. That'd make you a non-commentator, wouldn't it? But well, Kamala Harris says so many things that, and her actions don't back it up. For one thing, she was spouting off those so-called accomplishments, and Donald Trump's administration's the one that brought down about the diabetes medicine and about the border when she went down there and said, "Don't come," and here they just continue flooding in the day after, and it just the actions don't back up what she's saying. Anyone that wanted to check it out would know that she's just lying. And but about the shooter, about Donald Trump and them, and Corey and the rest, it's very troubling to know that when you get research and you find out about certain facts. But BlackRock had bought the building 4 months before.
Oh my gosh! You talk about BlackRock. BlackRock, yeah, it's one of those things where these bankers, investment bankers, they're into all sorts of things. And I know that we make them out to be boogeymen, but I think they are. They're like modern day boogeymen. They've got their hands in absolutely everything. And I saw these videos connecting them to this guy who was the shooter. He was in their video, their commercial. I don't know. I don't think things should get that big. We should be using antitrust laws to prevent that type of tyranny of the majority, even in the world of business, at least the way I see it, because these things can happen. What happens is power gets concentrated, and it's not just power that's concentrated privately; it spills out into the public square, And that's where, I was just talking to somebody today about this. Bill Gates and his pursuit for this relentless pursuit that he has to like replace meat, right? He's all about making the artificial meat. And it just, the first thing that hits me is he's got too much money, and too much time. And that's why he gets involved in these things. When people have that kind of money and that kind of time, they start to think, well, the world is my oyster. Literally. Like everything's a playground. And they can afford to do what they want to do, so they do it. And they don't realize that this is, altering the balance of power for the rest of us who don't have any power. So, yeah, I think you make a lot of sense. She says, don't come. It's obviously way bigger than that. We have to be careful about, who's coming across the border and, quite frankly, who's calling the shots right here inside our border. More importantly, Ron in Coleman, Alabama. Thank you, brother. Appreciate it. Let's continue our conversation. Very kind words saying that I admitted I was wrong once, and that's it. It only happened once, so that's all you're getting from me. Let me see. Where do we go? Let's go to Betty. Betty's in Aberdeen, South Dakota. KSDN. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for taking my call.
My pleasure.
I came in late tonight, so I only heard the tail end of the gentleman you had on that was talking about taxes and stuff.
Yes.
And I think that we have caused our own tax problems in that we have allowed the government way too long to take our taxes out before we get paid. We have allowed them to take our taxes out of our checks. And so there are many people who don't even know how much is taken out of their tax or out of their checks for the federal government. And then, of course, Social Security.
How convenient, right? Isn't that convenient that it's so much easier, if you're like, oh, well, I see that I made, $1,500 on this check, but I realized that I only got, I don't know, 900 of it because it went to this, and this. But that'll come back at Social Security. At least some people think it will. And you're right. They have accustomed us to get robbed. The extortion is real. It's almost like a forced tithe in a church, right? And I'm not saying tithing in a church is forced, but, you're supposed to give cheerfully and willfully and happily. But this is the government saying, oh, listen, before you do anything with your first fruits, we want that right, the cream right off the top. As soon as you get paid, we need you to pay us. And you're right. I hate to get into taxation as theft because, we could be here all day. The phones line up. People want to talk about it. Everybody's, angry at the government for that. But ultimately, Betty, I agree. There should be a flat tax, a fair tax, something like that where, you're forced to contribute that way. And that's it. And let the rest of us be. Let us be free, right? That's my thought. Anyway, Betty in Aberdeen, South Dakota, thank you for the call, KSDN. I appreciate that. We're going to get to the rest of your calls in Montana, Pittsburgh, Idaho, and more. The phone number again, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. We're coming right back with your calls and more conversation. Don't go anywhere. I'm Rich Valdez.
Now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So you've got Secretary Blinken. Is that his name? No, Admiral Kirby. Who do we have talking about Kirby? We've got Admiral John Kirby talking about a confirmation that Iran has been funding some of these pro-Hamas protests in the United States. Listen to this.
We've said ourselves, the Director of National Intelligence came out publicly and said that we do know that Iran has been funding and encouraging some of the protest activity here in the United States. Some of it. We do not believe that all the protest activity out there on a daily basis is being fully funded by Iran. There's a lot of organic concern out there in the American people about what's going on in the Middle East, and most of these protests are formed and fashioned in that regard.
John Kirby, come on. I'm glad he said, what he said, and he told the truth. Of course, it's not all of the activity. Iran gets the biggest rabble-rousers to go and start this movement of people that are concerned, like he said, and organize the people. Then you just need people to follow the leaders. So the leaders are the ones that get paid. But obviously, Iran can't do this on their own. They need the help of a massive organization of lefties. The Democrat Party, they're the ones that are helping. They're the ones that are complicit. He leaves that out conveniently, but that's the truth. All you had to do was look at the video that I saw where they were all going to jail and then being released from jail. And it looked like a who's who of the DNC. Probably a good preview for the upcoming nomination. But that's exactly what's going on. And listen, when he says Iran is funding this, that doesn't mean that there are not radicals on the ground here that are recruiting and training and in their own environments. Listen to this one. We've got this one here. Let me see if I don't mispronounce this name. Give me a moment. Number 9. Here we go. This is, I'm going to, for lack of a better word, I am going to say he is a preacher. But I think his official title is Islamic scholar Hussein al-Nashed. And he's in Dearborn Heights, Michigan, conducting a Shiite ceremony in a mosque. At least that's how it appears in the video. Praising the Islamic Revolution in Iran and saying that in America, you're forbidden from saying Hezbollah is good. If you say that, he says the government will come get you. Obviously, because they're listed as a terrorist organization, sir. And this is the problem. He's got a problem with that. Listen to this.
If you look back at the history of Lebanon, and you look at the history of Iran, and you look at the history of Damascus, Syria, specifically the Shia regions, and you look at the history of Iraq, and you don't need to go too far. You just got to go back 180 years. That's all you got to do. Just go 180 years. And you will find that even until then, not even 180 years, 40 years ago is when Ayatollah Khomeini came. That was the kind of the last. The Shias were living the most despicable life. We were the shanty towns. It's only with the Islamic Revolution that our lot has changed. And I know some people are not pro-Islamic Revolution. You don't have to be. But at the same time, don't be so disrespectful to the one who taught you dignity. Don't be disrespectful to the one who honored you and honored your religion and gave you feet to stand upon. There's a lot of governments in the world that will let you be free in everything except when you say that the government is being oppressive. Then you're an enemy of the state. In the United States, I can't be freedom of thought. I've got the freedom of speech to say what they allow me to say. But if I want to think for myself and I look objectively at what's going on in Gaza and I say, you know what, Hezbollah is actually not bad. Hezbollah is a very good thing. Next thing I know, FBI is at my doorstep. Yalla tfaddal anna, lanضيفك شوي.
Now,
is that freedom of thought? Am I free in this country to think what I want to think? No. I'm free to say what they will let me say.
Now, just imagine getting a knock on the door from the FBI because you're saying Hezbollah is good. I mean, doesn't surprise me. Now, maybe I'm the bad guy here, right? That's how they'll paint it and say, well, you know, it's like the cost of living increase. Not inflation, not bad policy, none of that, no. It's just, you know, life becoming more expensive here, the cost of living. This guy is a Looney Tune, in my opinion. This, again, is Hussein al-Nashed, Dearborn, Michigan. This guy is a Shiite cleric preaching at this mosque and clearly upset that he feels censored, that he feels he can't be himself because he can't openly support Iran for being the murderous terrorists that they are. Wow. Imagine that. And I guess imagine what's worse is that right now we have this conversation going, but who knows? Who knows before this conversation becomes something else, right? Like it did yesterday when these people were viciously tossing the cops around. I back the blue all day, every day. I do. But I saw videos where cops were getting manhandled by these groups of people. What is one to do? He thinks Hezbollah is good. I think his thinking is radical. I think his thinking is dangerous for America. Clearly was dangerous for the cops that weren't able to lock everything down. Wow. Anyway, I want to get your reaction to this audio and so much more. Let me see. Where do we go? We go to Paul, Boise, Idaho, KIDO. What's going on, brother? All right. I can't hear Paul. So let's go to a commercial here. We'll come right back. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
So glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
And while you teach students about our nation's past, these extremists attack the freedom to learn and acknowledge our nation's true and full history, including book bans. Book bans in this year of our Lord 2024. And on these last two issues, just think about it. So we want to ban assault weapons, and they want to ban books.
That is Vice President Kamala Harris hitting it hard. She's on the campaign trail. We want to ban books, and they want to ban assault weapons. And to go a step further, she should have said, like the ones that killed their beloved orange leader. Right? She could have thrown that in there. But the reality here is I don't think anybody's banning a book per se. I think people are protecting their curriculum and what their children learn about. The book is always going to be available, right? At the library, you could buy it, whatever. They're just saying, look, we're not going to have books that have pornographic context or that are highly hyper-sexualized in our curriculum. And I think that's safe and that's the right thing to do. I don't understand why Kamala Harris would rail against that. But that's exactly what she's doing. Let's see. Let's go to Frank, Evergreen, Montana, KOFI. Go right ahead.
Hi, Rich. Yeah.
Hey, Frank.
Kamala is an assault weapon. Ever since she was a attorney general in the state of California, what did she do? She released all the prisoners in the insane asylums because they couldn't afford to house them anymore. They put them into homeless shelters or just out to the streets, and then they start following them to other states. And my gosh, before all this other a foreign invasion. She was invading all the West, Western states, and it's overpopulated with some of the worst criminals, and some of the worst criminals are females, lesbians. They're tag teams. They're married to each other, but they live in two separate houses, and then they prey on other women, and then they go after their husbands and their property, and it's just they're vicious. There's like a vampire society, and when she says predators, she should look at herself. She's a lesbian, and she should know this.
I don't know about that. We're going to have to ask Doug Emhoff. Doug Emhoff, if you're out there, the second gentleman right now is his title, then give us a call and give us the scoop on that. I don't know if any of that's true, but a fascinating analysis. Frank in Evergreen, Montana, KOFI in the building. Thank you, Frank. I appreciate that. Something to think about, right? Is Que Mala Eres? Do I need a new nickname for her? Oh, my gosh. That might be difficult. Anyway, we continue. Let's go to Jane. Jane is giving us a call from upstate New York, Albany area, WGDJ. Go right ahead.
That's too funny. I'm sorry. Yeah, I want to point out, Kamala Harris is, and I worked with Bernie Sanders at one point. She is.
Why?
I worked with the state when I was in.
When you were doing the child protection stuff.
And I'll tell you what, she is full-fledged communist. You listen to everything that witch is saying. And her voice is nauseating, isn't it? Good Lord. And whenever you would do anything that would help people and get them a job, the first thing Bernie Sanders would do is say, nope, don't take that job, or we'll take everything away from you. We'll take your medical. We'll take your mental health. And that's
encouraging government dependence.
Yes, and that's exactly what she's doing. She's worse than Biden, and that's pretty bad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I was talking about that yesterday. I recorded a podcast, not my own. I was a guest on someone else's podcast. But a very provocative name. It goes by APW, but Attention Horrors Podcast is the name of it. And they talk about hip-hop culture, hip-hop music, and they wanted to do a political episode because of the election. So they asked me to go on, and I met these guys a long time ago, cool guys, so I decided to do it. And we were talking about that, and I was saying one of the biggest problems that in any community, whether it's a community of color, just Americans by and large, are facing is this encouragement of being on government dependence, and the government encouraging people to accept this dependence, and how they're moving the needle. It used to be, if you were poor or had a lower income, you could qualify for free or reduced lunch. But that is quickly moving, and instead of being like if you're 50% above poverty, you get this much. Now they're making it so that families that are not even close to poverty can still participate because they want this government dependence, and they try to paint it as a good thing. Everybody eats food for everybody, irrespective of your income. But the reality is somebody's paying for that. Somebody's you, me, and everybody listening, and it's just a cause for concern. What are your thoughts?
It's full-fledged control, and that's exactly what the communist Marxists do. That's what the state run by Bernie Sanders does. They want total control. They'll let kids have a special lunch or something, but the minute the parents step out of line, they go in and they say, no, you slipped up. Now we're taking
we're taking your kid.
You. Yeah,
right.
Isn't that terrible? It's just terrible.
Absolutely.
And we have to wake up. And I want and I'm shooting my mouth off. I'm sure you can imagine that. Mm-hmm. Everywhere I go. And people are starting to say, wow, you know what? I see what you're talking about. And just keep up what you're doing, please. You're like the best out there, Rich. And just
Absolutely.
stay with us.
Yep, no, I'm with you. And it just, it really makes you think, Jane. It really does. It makes you think like, wow, how do we get there? And I think it's just it's one conversation at a time, and trying to, like the one I had yesterday on this podcast with some really good guys. And that's the only thing we can do is just, really call people to the carpet, call out Kamala Harris for who she is, what she is, and where her ideas come from. Jane, thank you for the call. Big shout out to WGDJ, Paul Vandenberg Country. Big shout out to Paul as well. And folks, we're coming right back with the rest of your calls and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Look at Rich Valdez. He's now a radio host, and he's a great radio host.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Hi, everyone. It's Kamala Harris. Each day, we are seeing our rights and freedoms under attack, including the right of everyone to be who they are, love who they love, openly and with pride. So as we fight back against these attacks, let's all remember, no one is alone. We are all in this together, and your vote is your power. So please make sure your voice is heard this November and register to vote at vote.gov.
Can I get an amen?
Amen. Now on with the show.
And remember, you better vote.
So, of course, that's Kamala Harris, Kamala Harris, as I like to call her. And she's campaigning on RuPaul's drag queen show. And they're, of course, making light of lots of things. And she's really making an appeal to the drag queen audience. And some people don't care. They say live and let live. Others say, I can't believe you're doing that. You're the vice president. What is going on here? I don't know where you land on that, but I want to get your thoughts on it. Bill, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Go for it.
Hi, Rich. I'm going to try to make this quick. You know what? This is a perfect example, Kamala Harris of DEI. You know what? This woman should never have been able to run for the presidency of our country.
Yeah, but she's in, right? I mean, I know we can't live in the rearview mirror. She's there, and we've got to beat her again. And I think Trump's going to beat her fair and square this time around. But I hear you. A lot of people very dissatisfied with Kamala Harris. Bill, thank you very much for the call. Big shout out to you in Pittsburgh. KDKA in the building. Let's go to Becky, Bloomington, Illinois. What's that, like 100 miles from Chicago? WHOW. Go for it.
I love your show. Listen to you all the time.
Thank you so much.
Anyhow, one thing, listen to me, please. Bear with me.
Yeah, well, we only have about 30 seconds, and then they're going to kick us both out, so make it quick.
Oh, I can't do it in 30 seconds.
Do your best.
Okay, Obama's not involved. He wanted to be president. He couldn't do it again. Anyhow, now we got this psycho in there, Giggles, I call her. And
yeah, she's got a great laugh.
I call her Giggles and JoJo is what I call them. Anyhow, back a long time ago, I heard when Hillary Bleach bit that server that she had at home, all the information that she had on it, she sent it to Obama. And so he's got all the stuff that she had on there, and then she bleach bit and got rid of all of that stuff before they could get it.
Interesting. I don't know all the details around that. We're going to have to do a little investigating and find out the legality and reality of all that. But Becky, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate you tuning in. Big shout out to everybody in Chicago and Bloomington, Illinois. WHOW in the building. Folks, we're doing it again tomorrow. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night and God bless. I'm Rich Valdez.